In a land of hunger and graves, Patrick made an impossible choice: stay and starve, or flee and vanish into the unknown. He left Ireland with nothing but grief in his bones, and a name that meant nothing in Boston. In the shadowed slums of East Boston, he built barrels by day and buried dreams by night. But he pressed on for the ones who would come after. He died at just 35, struck down by cholera, alone in a candlelit room, his wife weeping at his side. He died poor, unseen, but not forgotten. Because generations later, his bloodline stood before the world, hand on Bible, sworn in as an American president.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
that you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
Patrick Kennedy's journey was a new chapter in the American dream. But the first chapters were written thousands of years earlier by the native nations who called this land home. For nearly 15,000 years, the first Americans lived in profound isolation, adapting to every environment from the frozen Arctic to the steaming Amazon. Their genetics remained remarkably stable across the millennia. Their maternal lines, A2, B2, C1, D1, and X2A, reveal that early Americans came in several distinct waves. First, hunter-gatherers carrying A2, B2, C1, and D1 crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia. Later, groups like those bearing D4H3A followed coastal routes. And still later, mysterious arrivals left the unique X2 lineage in North America. For millennia, the great rivers, mountains, and plains of the Americas knew only the footsteps, prayers, and dreams of these first peoples. Until barely 5 centuries ago, sails appeared on the horizon. The Spanish, first in the Caribbean, then on the mainland. The English pushing up and down the Atlantic coast. The French navigating the great rivers of the interior. With them came new blood and devastation. Smallpox, measles, influenza, and other old-world diseases swept across the land, killing up to 90% of Native Americans in some regions before many had ever seen a European face. Genetically, the Europeans carried deep ancient lineages of their own. To understand them, you must first understand Europe's layered past. First came the ancient Western hunter-gatherers. After the last ice age, they moved into Europe, carrying paternal haplogroups like I2 and maternal lines like U5 and U4. Many had dark skin, but blue eyes, a striking contrast to what we think of today. For thousands of years, they hunted and gathered along Europe's forests and rivers, leaving behind some of the oldest DNA layers in modern Europeans. Then came the Anatolian farmers. Around 9,000 years ago, people from what is now Turkey brought farming, pottery, and domesticated animals into Europe. They carried paternal haplogroup G2A and maternal haplogroups like N1A, T2, and K1. Their skin was lighter than the Ice Age hunters, though still darker than today's Northern Europeans. They had brown eyes and dark hair, and they revolutionized life in Europe, building its first villages. In time, their descendants would play a central role in shaping ancient monuments, including the construction of iconic sites like Stonehenge. Finally came the steppe herders from the east. Around 5,000 years ago, the young Naya people swept westward from the steppes north of the Black and Caspian Seas. They carried paternal haplogroups R1b and R1a and maternal lines like H6, U501 and W. They brought horses, wheels, Indo-European languages and lighter skin mutations that spread across Europe. And much later, these genes and languages helped shape the predominantly European-descended populations of the US and became the main languages spoken across the Americas. By the time Columbus set sail, most Europeans carried a complex mixture: hunter-gatherer toughness, Anatolian agricultural innovations, steppe warrior mobility, and language. Paternally, R1b dominated Western Europe. R1a was common in Eastern Europe and Scandinavia. Maternally, haplogroups like H, U5, K, and J1 were widespread. Physically, Europeans varied from pale skins in the north to olive tones in the Mediterranean, a diversity that still defines the continent today. But Europeans did not come alone. Starting in 1619, Africans were forcibly brought to America. Their paternal haplogroups, E1b1a, A1, and B2, trace back to ancient civilizations of West Africa. Their maternal lines, L0, L1, L2, and L3, are among the oldest on Earth, reaching back over 150,000 years. Despite the horrors of slavery, African Americans built new cultures and left a profound genetic imprint. Today, the average African American genome reflects about 73% African ancestry, 24% European, and 3% Native American ancestry. The 19th century brought another tidal wave of change, this time voluntary. Millions of Irish, Germans, Italians, Jews, and Scandinavians crossed the Atlantic. The Irish carried paternal R1BL21 and maternal H1 and K1, adapted to the misty British Isles. Germans and Scandinavians brought I1, R1B, U106, and maternal U5B, strong northern bloodlines. Italians and Greeks carried J2 and E1B1B, signatures of Mediterranean civilizations. Jewish migrants from Eastern Europe carried J1, K1A1, B1A, rooted in the ancient Middle East. These groups blended into the urban melting pots of New York, Boston, Chicago, and Philadelphia. After 1965, America opened its doors to the world. These stations arrived carrying paternal O1 and maternal lines like D4 and M7. South Asians brought lineages like L, H, and R2 and maternal lines M and U2E. Latin Americans carried mixes of European, Native American, and African ancestries, a living reminder of the continent's intertwined histories. Middle Easterners and North Africans brought ancient haplogroups like J1, T, and U6. Today, America's genetic profile looks like this: 60 to 65% European ancestry, 13 to 14%, African ancestry, 6 to 7%, East and South Asian ancestry, 1 to 2% Native American ancestry, and a fast-growing share of mixed ancestry, especially among younger Americans. Beyond DNA, identity also lives in names. Surnames carry histories of migration, survival, and place. In America, they reflect the many worlds that converged to form one nation. Now, through these names, the journey continues. English settlers were the backbone of early colonial America. From Jamestown to Plymouth Rock, and aboard the Mayflower, the 1620 ship that carried English pilgrims seeking religious freedom, they shaped the language, laws, and institutions of the young republic. By 1790, about 60% of the US population was of English ancestry. Their legacy became so embedded that many simply identified as American. Genetically, they carried high levels of R1BU 106, a distinctly Germanic lineage linked to Anglo-Saxon migrations, as well as maternal lines like H1, K, and U5. Many early US presidents were of English descent. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison all came from English colonial families in Virginia. Abraham Lincoln's ancestry also goes back to Norfolk, England. Their surnames became the most widespread in the country, simple, occupational, and deeply rooted in medieval English life. Names like Smith, Taylor, Clark, and Wright are not only among the most common in America, but also reflect the practical trades and social roles of early English society. In many ways, the English surname became the template for American identity itself. German immigrants have been part of American history since colonial times. They arrived in waves, early religious refugees like the Pennsylvania Dutch in the 1700s, and millions more during the 19th century fleeing war, poverty, and political upheaval. By the early 1900s, Germans had become the largest self-reported ethnic group in the US. They settled across the Midwest, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and brought with them farming traditions, beer brewing, and a strong sense of community. Genetically, they contributed heavily to the US paternal haplogroup R1BU 106, shared with the English, and also I1, particularly from northern Germany. Maternal lines like U5, H, and K are also common. 3 American presidents had German roots on their father's side: Dwight D. Eisenhower and Herbert Hoover. Donald Trump also has German ancestry through his grandparents, who immigrated from Karlstadt, Germany in 1902. German surnames often reflected occupations, locations, or physical traits, and many were adapted or anglicized after arriving in America. Many German-American surnames reflect everyday life in Old Europe. Miller comes from Miller, a mill worker. Schmidt was the German Schmied, a blacksmith. Schneider means tailor, while Fischer caught fish and Weber wove cloth. Hoffman managed farms or estates, and Keller worked in wine cellars. Becker baked bread. Bauer was simply the farmer. And Wolf, taken from the animal itself, may have begun as a nickname. But like the others, it became a name passed down through generations, carrying skill, place, and pride from Germany to America. One of the earliest and most influential immigrant groups to shape the American story came from just across the Atlantic. The Irish story in America began with hardship. During the Great Famine of the 1840s, nearly 1 million fled starvation in Ireland, sailing to America in overcrowded, disease-ridden ships. Most arrived with nothing, no money, no land, and often no welcome. In cities like Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, they crowded into tenements, took the hardest jobs, and endured deep prejudice. But over time, they rose. Irish immigrants helped build the canals, railroads, and police forces of America's growing cities. They became mayors, senators, union leaders, priests, and presidents. Their songs and sorrow, faith and fire shaped the culture of modern America. At least 23 US presidents have claimed some degree of Irish ancestry. Most famously, John F. Kennedy became the first Irish Catholic president in 1960, the grandson of immigrants from County Wexford. Other presidents, including Andrew Jackson, James Polk, Ulysses S. Grant, Ronald Reagan, and Joe Biden, all traced roots to Ireland. For a people once barred from "help wanted" signs, the path to the Oval Office marked a powerful reversal. Genetically, the Irish brought high levels of R1BL21, a distinctly Celtic paternal lineage rooted in the misty highlands of Ireland and Scotland. On the maternal side, haplogroups like H1, H3, and K1 remain common, markers of long ancestry on the Atlantic fringe. Irish surnames carry more than identity. They carry history. Unlike English or German names, many Irish surnames come from ancient Gaelic clans. Names that once began with O, meaning descendant of, or Mac, meaning son of, were often shortened or anglicized, but their meaning lived on. Immigrants who arrived with little more than hunger and hope passed down surnames that once belonged to kings, warriors, and poets. By the 20th century, many Irish surnames had become among the most common in America. You see them everywhere, from courthouse plaques to bar signs, from Hollywood scripts to presidential ballots. The Italian migration to America came late, but it came in waves. Between 1880 and 1920, more than 4 million Italians crossed the Atlantic, most of them from southern Italy and Sicily. They arrived poor, often illiterate, and deeply Catholic, settling in the crowded neighborhoods of New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and Chicago. Most worked as laborers, fruit sellers, masons, or street cleaners. They faced suspicion, xenophobia, and violence. But through hard work, tight-knit families, and cultural pride, they built new lives, brick by brick, block by block. Genetically, Italian Americans often carry Y-DNA haplogroups, J2 and E1b1b, linked to ancient Mediterranean civilizations. On the maternal side, they show strong levels of U5b, T2, and H, reflecting deep roots in southern Europe. Their surnames came with them. Often based on first names, places, or characteristics, they stayed largely intact in America, even if their bearers didn't. Italian surnames arrived as music in the mouth: Russo, Marino, Vitale, full of rhythm and meaning. Some, like Esposito, reveal harsh realities, given to orphans in state care. Others reflect beauty or origin: Romano, from Rome, De Luca, son of Luca. Unlike other groups, Italians rarely changed their names. Their surnames became anchors, linking families in Brooklyn, Boston, and beyond to towns in Naples, Palermo, and Calabria. Today, Italian-American names are found in every part of American life: on Supreme Court benches, in music halls, in sports, and on neighborhood pizzerias. The Scottish story in America begins with both Highland clans and lowland farmers, but especially with the Scots-Irish. Protestant Scots who had first settled in Northern Ireland before migrating to the American colonies in the 1700s. They came by the tens of thousands, seeking land and religious freedom. Most settled along the Appalachian frontier, stretching from Pennsylvania to Georgia. They farmed, fought, and helped carve a rough but resilient culture into the American backcountry. Genetically, Scottish Americans often carry R1BL21, the same Celtic paternal haplogroup common in Ireland and Western Scotland. Some also show I1 and R1A, especially from Norse-influenced regions of the Highlands and Isles. On the maternal side, HK and U5 are frequent. Scottish and Scots-Irish Americans have had a powerful presence in the White House. Harry Truman had Scottish ancestry through his mother's side. Gerald Ford came from Scottish and English settlers. Jimmy Carter descended from Scots-Irish pioneers in the South. George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush also had Scottish roots. And Donald Trump's mother, Mary MacLeod, was born in the Scottish Hebrides, making him half Scottish by birth. Scottish surnames carry the weight of clan loyalty, battlefields and landscapes. Names like MacDonald, Campbell and Douglas speak to Highland power struggles. Others like Stuart and Wallace reflect titles, rebellion and royal service. Many Scots-Irish names lost their Mac prefix after migration, blending quietly into the colonial mix. But their influence endured, especially in the South and Appalachia, where Scottish traditions in music, language and law left a lasting mark. They helped shape a culture of independence, one that marched through the American Revolution and echoes still today. Anzac child's blood still flows through Native American children today. The spirit of West African survivors beats in every African American heartbeat. The strength of steppe riders, Mediterranean sailors, Anatolian farmers, Viking explorers, and Celtic warriors lives on in millions of modern Americans. The United States has never been genetically pure, and never will be. It is a river fed by 1,000 tributaries, always changing, always flowing forward. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through America's ancient DNA story, like and subscribe. And tell us, where did your ancestors begin their journey?